Wednesday, January 22nd. It's Wisecrack Live. Michael Burns here with producer Henry, broadcasting live with a sinus infection. And speaking of sinus infections, or infections in general, or things that infect your brain and make you feel bad, Curtis Yarvin, the leading philosophical and intellectual voice of Silicon Valley, Silicon Valley, Silicon Valley, Silicon Valley, is on the New York Times, or was on the New York Times for a special interview, which was surprising because, he's sort of like a alt dark intellectual figure. Some of you probably know that we made a video about Yarvin as well as the sort of right-wing theological intellectual movement in America. We made that a few months ago. Um, if you're watching this with your eyeballs, you might notice that there's steam coming towards me. It's because I brought a humidifier with me to work today. Some people do bring your child to work, bring your daughter to work. I do bring my humidifier to work. It's going to help me do my job better. It's going to help me perform better. It's going to help me be here for you better. It's going to help me when we film a video later as well. Shout out to everyone who watched the video from Friday that came out on the channel, written by John Duncan about degrowth and the sort of myth of reckless economic growth. I was really excited to see the people watch that one and liked it a lot, so that was cool. But yeah, we're doing Yarvin talk today, and one of those things where, like, there's always this balance, and we'll see this when we get into this video, of how we should cover, let's call them more vaguely right-wing figures in the mainstream media. Is it better to quote unquote platform people? Should we air out the ideas of people that maybe have some problematic views? I don't know. We'll check it out. I'll let you know as well. I would say I'm feeling not great about social, political, and cultural reality in America right now. Got up this morning and saw that $500 billion are being invested in a government AI program, which Sam Altman, whatever the OpenAI guy
Yeah,
is.
they're gonna
Um,
speed up disease cures. That's somehow gonna make healthcare affordable for all of us, or something, right?
yeah, I mean, yeah, and again, it's like it's 2025 is the year of teleology on Wisecrack Live, but like the end game here is just avoiding the fact that we have a broken healthcare system in this country and normal people can't get taken care of. But instead, we're going to invest billions in AI systems, adapting cures to your genome. Oh, really? Mine, me, and the dock workers and substitute teachers, some unemployed folks, and our unhoused neighbors. Are they going to do it for us too? No, it's going to be a secret technology that just the rich assholes get to use.
They're coming for the Wikipedia, Michael. The
Um,
Wikipedia.
oh, yeah, they're coming for Wikipedia, which like truly sucks. And this is another one of those things, guys, where they're coming for Wikipedia because I don't know how you say his name, Elon Musk, super chat in the immortal words of the Mountain Goats. I'm gonna make it through this. That's such a good song, Wonder Platypus. And hey, if you guys don't listen to the Mountain Goats, do. And if anyone else has songs or artists they're listening to in this era, for me, whenever things get a little weird, American politically style. My sinuses are filled with goo. I like to listen to the Monitor by Titus Andronicus. Um,
I
but
love that album.
it's so fucking good, guys. The enemy is
Yeah,
everywhere.
the enemy is everywhere.
But I, Henry referenced this, but yeah, they're gonna like ruin Wikipedia because Elon Musk posted a thing that was like, it has more far left ideas than far right ideas. And it's like, hey, guys, maybe Wikipedia is a thing that's actually pretty good and is often backed by scholarship and sources. And maybe sometimes, like, maybe sometimes, I don't know, I can't even get into it. But if they take Wikipedia from us, guys, we're so cooked because X/Twitter it just feels totally cooked. Now, I got up this morning thinking, oh, Elon Musk did Heil Hitler, Zigile, whatever you want to call it. That's probably what people are talking about. But you know what? I got told on my sidebar on X that there's controversy around Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez doing a Nazi salute because she did it. Because AOC criticized Elon Musk. So someone, I think it was Libs of TikTok, found a video where she was giving a speech where she was like, guys, and listen, that's a normal thing to do. If you're talking, you're handsy. I'm saying this. Hey, guys, what's up? We need to fight back. See, I just did all that. But they found a clip like that, and they're just completely rewriting the narrative that AOC is a Nazi, which is an insane thing to do. It's just like, what is happening, guys? What is happening? Obviously, TikTok came back. Yay. Oh, wait, but now on TikTok, your posts get banned if you say Free Palestine.
Yeah, I was seeing
Interesting.
some comments blocked, moderation stuff going on pretty heavy over there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so it's like, oh, they made a deal to bring it back. You know, I was on the side of thinking people were being conspiratorial, and they were thinking that one of the reasons the American government didn't like TikTok is because it was a method of radicalization and, you know, people learning that genocide was happening, things of that nature. Maybe they were right, guys. I don't know. I'm just really feeling like we're kind of cooked. I don't know what else to say. I don't. So Marvel Snap is down still. We can't have anything. So to brighten things up, let's watch some Curtis Yarvin. And for those of you who don't know who Curtis Yarvin is, again, we did a whole video about him. You can check it out. He is a self-described intellectual Silicon Valley philosopher. I would say if he has like a big idea, his big idea is that American democracy and government should be replaced by a Silicon Valley influenced CEO model, where the government should have a CEO with absolute control, aka a monarch, and that this would be more efficient and better for things. He gets into that in this. He's also said some very weird, sus, racist, sexist stuff. And also, my big critique of him, we'll talk about this more. He's bad at the thing he says he does. He says he's an intellectual and a philosopher. He is bad at those things.
Theo in the
Go ahead.
chat is just reminding me that the AI initiative was called Stargate, right?
It's some sci-fi
just-
shit. It's some just like, what are we doing?
Just taking the terms, just mad-libbing them, no context. At this point, it has to be intentional. The whole faking his gaming record, lying about what he plays, lying about being able to do anything. Like, he's trolling. Like, it's pure trolling, right? Like, he knows Stargate's not an AI thing, right? That's like space travel or dimensional travel.
I don't even know. To answer Mav's question, I'm not bonging it in the room. Oh, that would be sick. If you see a stream where I'm bonging it, that's gonna be on my channel, not on Wisecrack, because I can't take down my colleagues with me. It's a humidifier. I think it's kind of like creating a fun effect. I just have a bad sinus infection that I got from my sick daughter, who I've had to take care of the past week. Having kids is fun. Having a sick kid sucks. It sucks. Ketamine is a hell of a drug.
Sounds like one of the most horrifying experiences out there.
Yeah. But that's where we're at. And I can't see a world where I all of a sudden start thinking that everything is chill and good anytime soon. Chicago Bears got a new head coach. I'm not mad about that, but we're not here to talk about football. So we'll get into the Curtis Yarvin stuff and go from there. Shout out to everyone in the South who's getting snowed on. Did it snow in Austin, Henry?
Yeah, it's not too bad today. Yesterday morning it was much denser and colder, but most of it's kind of melted. But it has been cold these past few days.
Wow. It's burning. It's burning here. It's snowing in Florida. I mean, like, sure, the world's ending. Let's watch Curtis Yarvin on the New York Times. New York Times, of course, is a part of the Cathedral, but we'll talk about that later.
Yarvin had been writing online about political theory and relative obscurity. His ideas were pretty extreme, that institutions at the heart of American intellectual life, like the mainstream media and academia, need to be dissolved.
Also, the
Stand by as Michael figures out video.
The place where I work is supposed to get me a new computer, and then they just stopped responding to the emails about the new computer. Because why not? Okay, let's see. Invalid access code? How dare you? Sorry that you guys are having to sit through this. Please do like the stream if you're here. Reminder, if you haven't checked it out yet, we put out a video on Severance over on Wisecrack 2 that's pretty sick. So if you're watching the new season of Severance, check that video out. It accompanies it very well.
Also, shout out to yesterday's Show Me the Meaning on Nosferatu. I think.
Yes.
I think we really dug into some stuff I hadn't really thought about with the movie before, and Raymond and Austin were wonderful to chat with on that.
Hell yeah. I'm excited to join you guys next week to talk about The Brutalist.
Yeah.
Here's my hot take of the day. Not that anyone asked for it. The whole AI controversy around that is really dumb and manufactured. People just want to be mad. That's my take. Let's watch this.
For years, Curtis Yarvin had been writing online about political theory and relative obscurity. His ideas were pretty extreme, that institutions at the heart of American intellectual life, like the mainstream media and academia, need to be dissolved.
He hates Harvard
He
so
also
much.
believes that government bureaucracy should be radically gutted, and that American democracy should be replaced by what he calls a monarchy run by a CEO.
Monarch is good. It's a neutral term.
But while Yarvin himself may still be obscure,
why do we think Barron Trump doesn't get picked on in college? Is it because he has security all the time? Is that probably why?
His ideas are not. Vice President-elect J.D. Vance has alluded to his notions of forcibly ridding American institutions of so-called wokeism. And Yarvin has also found fans in the most powerful and increasingly political ranks of Silicon Valley, like Mark Andreessen, the venture capitalist turned informal advisor of President-elect Trump.
We are living under FDR's personal monarchy.
Peter Thiel, a Republican megadonor, has called him a powerful historian. On top of it all, Yarvin has become a fixture of the right-wing podcast universe. He's been a guest on the shows of Tucker Carlson and Charlie Kirk, among others.
Thank you for that lovely intro, Tucker.
I've been aware of Yarvin for years, but always thought of his work as pretty fringe. A lot of what Yarvin has to say is disturbing, and
he's also in his Ozempic phase. And listen, like, shout out to anyone who uses Ozempic in a safe and responsible way for diabetes or to lose some weight. Whatever, fuck it, do what's good for you. But it's very funny that Yarvin had an Ozempic phase and now he wears like James Dean outfits and has greaser hair. I just find that funny.
Historical evidence he justified.
And this, is this me doing the thing I did last week where I made fun of Mark Zuckerberg's dress and people got mad at me? I didn't make fun of his physical appearance. I made fun of his way of dress. You know, you can make fun of how I dress. Okay, that's the new rule. I'm gonna make fun of how people dress. You can make fun of how I dress.
It with is riddled with exaggeration, distortion, and sometimes just plain inaccuracy. But given that his ideas are now finding an audience with some of the most powerful people in the country, Yarvin can't be so easily dismissed anymore.
When you say to a New York Times reader, democracy is bad, they're a little bit shocked. But when you say to them, politics is bad, or even populism is bad,
he just makes up like people and what they think.
I'm David Marchese, and here's my conversation with writer Curtis Yarvin.
Does anyone know anything about David Marchese or his vibe? He looks like a very serious gentleman. I don't know anything about him, so I'm worried. So someone in the chat's gonna be, can't believe you're watching David Marchese.
I do wonder about that populism is bad thing, though. I'm so confused on what populism gets interpreted as meaning. Because I've heard people, call Trump a populist in the negative way. But then, like, I don't know. I think of populist as someone like Bernie, who's like, doing what the public wants.
Yeah. Just a couple of things in the chat real quick. I saw Says brought up the Behind the Bastards did a Yarvin series with Ed Helms. They did, and it was sick. Mehul brought up that you dress like a normie, bro. Can't even make fun of it. Honestly, that's why I said it. That's why I said you could make fun of the way I dress, because it's so boring, guys. I wear either blue or olive pants. I wear either plain blue or t-shirts or shirts I got at concerts. I wear solid colored overshirts or jackets, and a series of largely navy blue hats, normally from like restaurants or places I go that I like, or occasionally athletics teams. It's just boring, Drift King 305, and I hope you're doing okay down in cold Miami. Why are we giving these idiots a time of day? I don't know. You might be right. You might be right, Drift King. I don't know. Okay, Ultra, I'll try some new clothes. My wife got me a jacket for my 40th birthday that's like cool. It's like a cool jacket, and I'm afraid to wear it. Maybe if we hit 1,000 concurrents 2 days in a row, the next stream I'll wear my cool jacket. It's like something like Hassan would wear or something like that. I don't know if I can do it. Well, I guess it's nice that my wife thinks I'm cool. Check out this interview. Good production value.
To my understanding, one of your central arguments is that America needs to, I think the way you've put it in the past, is sort of get over our dictator phobia. that American democracy is a sham, beyond fixing, and having sort of a monarch style leader, or call it a CEO, or call it a dictator, like that's the way to go. So why is democracy so bad?
In the chat, if that sounds appealing to you at all, I'd love to hear why. I think I probably more than the average person can understand the logic behind a certain type of dictator. But if you have thoughts, let us know.
And why would having a dictator solve the problem?
Let me answer that in, I think, a way that will be relatively accessible to readers of the New York Times.
I'm gonna feed a troll real quick because I'm on one today. Meta Man Ray Mask Change said make a normal video so you can get called out and delete the bad comments. Dog, I don't delete comments. That's stupid. Sometimes comments get deleted because YouTube does them. Because sometimes people leave a comment and they're like, "Hey, you pussy bitch, I hope you die." And then they're like, "Why'd you delete that comment?" And it's like, dude, you said a bunch of crazy words and YouTube just policed them for us, you know? But if you just, I don't know. Leave mean comments on this one if you got them.
Times. You've probably heard of a man named Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Yes.
And I do a speech sometimes where I'll just read the last 10 paragraphs of FDR's first inaugural address, in which FDR essentially says to the American people, "Hey, Congress, give me absolute power or I'll take it anyway." So, did FDR...
If there's any historian here that knows this or if someone wants to fact check it, feel free. He tends to just say stuff about history, and then if you look it up, it's not that. He's really a good example of how if you say things confidently, and especially if you use dates, people will believe you. Like if you're just like, well, in 1776, William Henockerson actually had this treaty with the population of, it was outside Winnipeg, and I think they were established in 1840. You just say shit and people go for it. But I'm curious if his FDR stuff is correct.
Absolutely actually take that level of power. Yeah, he did. And so there's a great piece that I've sent to, some of the people that I know that are involved in the transition, there's all sorts of people.
It's like, don't stunt and say that you are an intellectual leader for those involved in the transition if when someone asks you who, you're going to get all shucks.
Milling around.
Name one.
There. Name one.
Name one!
Wow. Name one. Well, I definitely know Mark Andreessen, and so I sent this piece to Mark Andreessen. And it's an excerpt from the diary of Harold Ickes, who's FDR's Secretary of the Interior. And it's a little diary entry describing
I want to note that all of this is in response to the question, like, why do you think it would be better to have a CEO than Democratic leadership?
Cabinet meeting in 1933. And what happens in this
What's
cabinet
up, Paul?
meeting is that Francis Perkins, who's the Secretary of Labor, comes in to this meeting and is like, here, I have a list of the projects that we're going to do. FDR personally takes this list,
Chad, my girlfriend goes
looks at the projects in New York, and it's like, this is crap, I don't know what you're doing. Like, humiliates Francis Perkins in the Oval Office or wherever they're having their cabinet meeting. And then at the end of the thing, it's like everybody agrees.
Let's check it out. This guy has Jerry level Riz, 100 UC, gets no box. I like Drift King because he's someone who I feel like if we hung out, like, I feel like I get Drift King. The way he says stuff is the way sometimes I talk with friends. Not ways I would ever talk here in a public setting, but I love it. And every now and then I like speak the way that I sometimes do and used to speak around friends in front of my wife, and she's like, "What word did you just say?" And I'm like, didn't you even listen to like early 2010s blog rap music?"
That the bill would be fixed and then passed through Congress. This is just a picture of FDR acting like a CEO.
His example here is that there was a president who was an asshole. Do you think he's the first president who was an asshole? You think FDR is the last president who had everyone in a room and was like, "Hey, everyone, your ideas are shit"? I mean, if Amy Klobuchar's out here battering people to death with staplers, then I'm pretty sure presidents get a little aggro in the Oval Office.
And so, the question of was
the face
FDR
of the interviewer
a dictator? What does it mean to be a dictator? What does this pejorative word mean? I don't know. What I know is that Americans of all stripes, Democrats, Republicans, and everyone, except for a few right-wing Republicans, basically revere FDR. And
he says these generalizations like everyone reveres FDR. Yeah, when me and my friends hang out, we just all circle jerk and say the name FDR over and over. Like, the New Deal was like cool. It's cool that FDR, created government spending programs to increase infrastructure, and do a lot of nice things. What's up, Matt? What's up, Sean? What's up, Lenny McDonald? What's up, Pizza Boy? But like, I don't think that's like a thing. And he says a lot of stuff throughout here and a lot of stuff in his writings too. It makes these broad generalizations. And it's truly an example of someone who has just constructed a character to be mad at and will not stop talking about this fictional character that they're mad at.
FDR ran the New Deal like a startup.
So, as I understand it, the point you're trying to make is that we have had something like a dictator in the past in American history, and therefore it's not something to be afraid of now. Is that right?
What we see in the sort of the
Like, I'm not a historical genius, but I just don't think FDR was a dictator.
course of, to kind of look at the objective
Great
reality
Depression.
of power in the U.S. since the Revolution. You'll talk to people about the Articles of Confederation, and you're just like, name one thing that happened in America under the Articles of Confederation, and they can't, unless they're a professional historian.
Again, this is all in response to the question, why is it good to have a CEO?
Next, you have
and then it's like, if you don't know the Articles of Confederation, you don't get to have opinions,
Yeah, I'm not following his logic there. Like, the whole reason we did away with the Articles of Confederation is they were too, like, they didn't have a strong, like, federal apparatus.
Yeah, I think sometimes, like, I respect, and I really mean this, or maybe I don't respect, I envy people who can say the most inane bullshit and not be self-critical because they're so successful and powerful in life. I would, and you guys see me do this in this setting, where if I catch myself sounding like I'm overly full of shit, I just pull back. It's like, what am I doing here?
the first constitutional period with under George Washington. If you look at the administration of Washington, what you'll see is that basically what is established looks a lot like a startup. It looks so much like a startup that this guy, Alexander Hamilton, who is recognizably a startup bro,
My favorite rapper.
is running the whole government. He's basically the Larry Page of this republic. He's nominally the
Curtis,
secretary.
I have to say, I feel like I'm asking you, what did you have for breakfast? And you're saying, well, at the dawn of man, when cereals were first cultivated.
I like this guy.
I'll speed this up.
And then answer the question, what's so bad about democracy?
All right. To make a long story short, whether you want to call Washington, Lincoln, and FDR dictators, this sort of, opprobrious word, what they were was basically national CEOs. And they were running the government like a company.
I mean, so much of this involves this underlying axiomatic commitment to the idea that the CEO is like a spiritually important position and that startups are inherently good and successful things. Like, sure, have some startups done some good stuff. Yeah. Most of them fail and tons of them are just riddled with scam shit and all sorts of stuff. It's very weird that they've decided that that's like the model
from the top down.
So why is democracy so bad?
So it's not even that democracy is bad. It's just that it's very weak.
What is he saying?
And the fact that it's very weak is basically.
I know. Like, what is he saying?
Because,
guys?
like, he's just described, like, the executive branch, and it's like, yes, we have the executive branch as well as the other two branches. I don't know, because, like, he brings up Washington being a CEO, and he brings up FDR, and, like, I mean, the criticism's been levied against Nixon, against Lincoln, against W, against Reagan. Like, yeah, that's the executive branch. I don't understand what, like, he's trying to act like he's showing some kind of, like, new historical insight into something that's, like, consistently been present. Like, he has a fake debate in his head about the whole thing.
It's tough. It's real tough. If you're just tuning in, guys, it's Wisecrack Live. It's January 22nd. We're looking at the New York Times interview with Curtis Yarvin. I'm Michael Burns. I'm here with producer Henry. I am enmeshed in moisture because I have a sinus infection, but I'm also trying to really do a good job at my job, which is why I got this thing going. Also, I'm really looking to buy some socks. So I would just say if anyone has like socks they really like, a brand you're loyal to, let me know. I'm just really in the market to buy some socks. My filthy wife has been stealing my socks, which I guess, if you look at the wedding vows, it's, I could say, sock theft could be read as part of that. Let's get back to Yarvin.
Basically easily seen by the fact that very unpopular policies like mass immigration persist despite strong majorities being against them.
Mass immigration is a really
the question
popular.
of
Wait,
basically,
what?
is
Unpopular?
democracy good or bad, is I think a secondary question to, is it what we actually have? When you say to a New York Times reader, democracy is bad, they're a little bit shocked. But when you say
this whole picture of the New York Times, like arguably one of the most read newspapers in the world, and every New York Times reader, if you say democracy is bad, they would be shocked and clutch their pearls. Like this monolithic view that this man has of people based on what media they consume is pretty silly. I don't know why I still do, to be honest. I think it's because I use I have a New York Times subscription account that's tied to an old university email address, so I get like a student rate or something, and they haven't found out yet. But I read the New York Times and subscribe, and if you said to me democracy is bad, I'd be like, yeah, there's some pretty good arguments to be made for why it's maybe not all it's cracked up to be. But that's just me. Let's get back to it.
Say to them, politics is bad, or even populism is bad, they're like, of course, these are horrible things. And so the thing is, when you basically want to be say democracy is not a good system of government, just bridge that immediately to saying populism is not a good system of government. And then you'll be like, yes, of course, like actually, policy and law should be set by wise experts and people in the courts and lawyers and professors and so forth. Then you'll realize that what you're actually endorsing is aristocracy rather than democracy.
Your ideas are
Allie says he's fighting ghosts.
Pointed to by people in real positions of power in the Republic.
I want to note, Dr. Professor Christopher Maverick, PhD, subscribe to Vox Podcast and listen to it if you haven't. Also like this stream. Says, I don't even think he believes half this shit. He started with, I need to say something outrageous and evocative, and then worked backwards. Democracy is bad. That'll get clicks. And Porkin says, this could have been an email. Oh my God. Tony Bordeaux in the chat said, oh, sorry, not Tony. Tommy B said, Joey Ramone talking about loving Stalin. Oh my God.
Republican Party. I think it's probably overstated the extent to which you and JD Vance are friends, but he has
definitely overstated.
He has mentioned you by name publicly and referred to sort of de-wokeification ideas that sort of are very similar to yours. You've been on Michael Anton's podcast, and Michael Anton has been sort of tapped by Trump high up in the State Department, talking with him about how to install an American Caesar. Peter Thiel, a major Republican donor,
weird guy,
is has said you're an interesting thinker.
And it is important too, like more so than ever. And this gets back to my opening diatribe. I watched some of the inauguration. My wife said she didn't want to hear the sound, so I had it on with the subtitles. And it was wild to look behind Trump and see like all the guys, like the dude that runs Apple, like Tim Cook, someone that I think many would have assumed was some like soft Silicon Valley liberal dad type. All of these Silicon Valley leaders were sitting behind Trump. All of the tech Silicon Valley oligarchy, all of the people that own the platforms that we are all dependent on were all there lined up, ready to ask the proverbial presidential dioc. It was wild. And it's kind of disturbing. We have a video. Did we film this one or not? Oh, I'll check in 2 seconds. But we have a video coming out on techno-feudalism. Did we already film it? Maybe we filmed it last week. Yeah.
I'm editing that one currently.
Okay. Henry's editing it. But, we have a video coming out on techno-feudalism and like, yeah. Oh, awesome. But like, the guys have a plan. They know what they're doing. That's what makes Yarvin a little bit scary. Hank John Green has his awesome socks club that donates all profits to charity. Oh, thank you, Jelly Spread. I'll look at the Green Brothers socks. That has to be fun to have a brother you just have like a business with, make money, hang out. You love it.
And so let's say people in actual positions of power said to you, Curtis, we're going to do the Curtis Yarvin thing. What are the steps that they would take to change American democracy into something like
I mean, say what you will about the political writings of Karl Marx, but at least Marx is like, this is what I'm responding to. These are the material and economic conditions that are affecting working people in this way, and this is how we should respond to it. Yarvin doesn't really, and maybe he will later, but I've never really heard him do a good job of describing what the ills are. I'll frame it this way. With a lot of more left-wing or populist or whatever thinkers, they will often describe the conditions or injustices of working people or the massive majority of people and use that as a motivating first principle to argue for a change in society. It's almost like he's doing the opposite and saying like CEOs don't have enough power. The guys at the top, the guys who already have bazillions and run things, they need even more power. We need to take them even more seriously. There's not really a reference to people, the people, you know, shouts to Jean-Jacques Rousseau, things of that nature.
A monarchy.
My honest answer would have to be, it's not exactly time for that yet. Because what I see happening
Porkins, that
in
beef is
DC
alive
right now, you know, nobody should be watching this panicking, you know, thinking I'm about to be installed as America's secret dictator, and I don't think I'm even going to the inauguration.
Couldn't even get that invite.
Were you invited?
Theo Vaughn got invited. You didn't.
Why,
That's
like, I'm an outsider, man. You know, like I'm
Our
an
poor moldy
intellectual,
boy.
and the actual ways.
And he just said, I'm an intellectual. This is why someone actually, I need to respond to this. Someone on our Discord, shouts to our Discord community, in our Ask Me Anything channel, asked if I consider myself a philosopher. And I was going to answer and I didn't and blah, blah, blah. But I don't know. I think I only trust people that have a skepticism or at least an awkwardness about describing oneself as a philosopher, an intellectual, whatever it might be. But the way that he just says, like, I'm an intellectual, like, why? Because you know the dates that stuff happened? It's one of those weird, and I guess too, like, I understand the critique that to be an intellectual, to be a philosopher, whatever, doesn't mean that you got to have a PhD or have gone to an established university, but it means you have to do the stuff that an intellectual would do. And you know, what does someone who gets a PhD do? They spend a lot of time reading text carefully and critically, often learning the original languages of those texts, participating in a community of scholarship, and producing work that meets the standards of that field or community of scholarship. You can do all of that without being under the confines of a university. And I think there's tons of people that are sort of, what's the word, like autodidactic, who, some of the smartest people I know, in fact, don't have the like stamp of approval of a university or whatnot, but they've done the stuff, you know? And this is an instance where I think he's faking the funk a bit, because he's someone who wants to be treated like a serious intellectual, but doesn't do the labor of the intellectual.
In which my ideas get into circulation is actually mostly through the staffers and the kind of younger people who basically kind of, you know, swim in this very online kind of soup. And I think that's fine. I think that what's happening now in DC, to sort of distinguish my much more radical ideas from what's happening now.
Big radical boy.
I would say that's what's happening now is there's definitely an attempt to revive the White House as an executive organization, which sort of governs the executive branch. And the difficulty with that is if you go to Washington and say to anyone,
let's see in the chat, Clockwork Man said, just read through FDR's address. Thank you so much. There was a Schmittian appeal to the exception, but Yarvin oversold his willingness to take power. Thank you so much, Clockwork Man. That's really cool. I really appreciate you doing that. Someone said he's still saying nothing.
Professionally involved in the business of Washington, that Washington would work just fine or even better if there was no White House at all. And they'll basically be like, yeah, of course. The executive branch works for...
This like isn't a hot take though. Like my dad at the dinner table used to be like, you know, the thing is with the presidency, he doesn't even have that much power, you know, and when you can't even do that much because you got Congress, you got Senate. So even if our guy wins, what's he going to do? Like, that's just like a thing dads have said for generations.
Congress. So you have these poor voters out there who elected as...
Shout out to my dad's best take, which was that it should be 1 6-year term and there shouldn't be multiple terms.
They think a revolution. They elected Donald Trump, and, you know, maybe the world's most capable CEO is
right.
in
And your
there.
point is he can't the way the system's set up, he can't actually get that much done.
He can't actually do that.
It's weird to say that, like, Donald Trump, especially of all people, can't get that much done, where in the past 2 days, he has just gone fucking ham in executive
signing
orders.
orders. He doesn't even know what's on those orders. He's just doing them.
Yeah, we now have this like weird unscientific definition of gender that's like law and like diversity.
Are we all ladies now
like
or
illegal.
something? I was seeing.
Yeah, I think it was like if someone understands this better than I do, I think like via the biological description offered in the executive order, we are all women. I'm fine with that. Ann Porkins, my dad was in Fargo the show. My dad definitely, I'm not even kidding, had Fargo the show energy. I'm trying to think what season. Maybe season 2 or 3. But yeah, big Tom Burns definitely had Fargo energy. Yeah, he renamed the Gulf of Mexico. I just like, if anything, what we're seeing is that there is a lot of executive power, and that those people who have been very supportive of the Democratic Party should maybe be skeptical of the lack of things that Joseph Weekend Bernie's Biden did or didn't do.
Much to it. And he can block things, he can disrupt it, he can create chaos and turbulence or whatever, but he can't really change what it is.
Do you think you're maybe overstating the inefficacy of a president? You could point to, the repeal of Roe is something that's directly attributable to Donald Trump being president.
There used to be a government website that was like, I might get this slightly wrong, it's like womensreproductiverights.gov or reproductiverights.gov, a website specifically designed to let women know their reproductive rights, and they just like deleted it on day one. What the fuck, man? Not to be all John Mayer's daughters here, but tough time. Tough time to be a girl dad.
One could argue that
what's up, Eddie?
The COVID response was attributable to Donald Trump being president.
I think the COVID response is a slightly better example. Certainly many things about COVID were different because Donald Trump was president. Here, I'll tell you a funny story.
Sure.
At the risk of bringing my children into the media,
Ruh-roh.
in 2016, my son and daughter, he's now 14, he was 6 then, and
I don't want to be all, Kendrick circa Meet the Grams, but seems like this guy would be a tough hang as a dad. I'm just gonna say it. It seems like, and I feel bad for his kids because I'm not trying to make fun of this at all. I'm pretty sure his wife he had kids with died, and so that sucks ass for those kids. But I don't know if this is because he does kind of in a weird way. I just brought up Kendrick and Meet the Grams. There is a Drake-ish energy, and it is easy now to apply sort of Drakeism as an almost ontological category to anyone who seems like they are just like faking their way into success with no real core values, talent, or skill. Shouts to everyone who's watching. Keep liking the stream. If we get to 666, we'll do Satan stuff. If we get to 777, we'll do a prayer. If we get to 888, we'll tell secrets.
And my children to a Shishi progressive Mandarin immersion school in San Francisco. And so
you send your kids to a Shishi. Sorry, I'm laughing.
I love his reaction there, basically saying that like Mr. like every liberal institution is bad, send his kids to a high-end Mandarin immersion school in San Francisco. Like, what's more fucking liberal elite than that?
You send your kids to a Shishi progressive school.
At the time, Mandarin immersion.
And, rubber hits the road. That's what happens.
Indeed. And you can't isolate children from the world, right? And so at the time, my late wife and I did not. We just adopted the simple expedient of not talking about politics in front of the children.
Smart
which
move.
I recommend to everyone. And
anyone who has older kids, I'd always be curious to hear how you navigate political discussions around them.
But of course, everyone's talking about it at school, right? And my son comes home and he has this very concrete question. He's like, Pop, when Donald Trump builds a wall around the country, how are we going to be able to go to the beach?
Good question.
And I'm like, wow, you really took him literally. Like everybody else is taking him literally, but you really took him literally. And I was like, if you see anything in the real world around you over the next 4 years that changes as a result of this election, I'll be surprised.
In one of your recent blog posts, I guess it's a newsletter, not a blog at this point, you referred to J.D. Vance as, I think, as a normie. What do you mean?
I would say that the thing that I admire about Vance.
God, if we had a stream where I just had to list things I admire about JD Vance, we would be on air for like just so many seconds.
And the thing that's really remarkable about him as a leader is that I think that he
and Porkins, that's how you raise kids,
within
though.
him all kinds of Americans. His ability to connect with like flyover Americans in the
him talking about how JD Vance connected with working Americans now, albeit he like
flyover Americans.
Yeah. I don't know, man. There was all those videos of JD Vance trying to go to like Western Pennsylvania donut shops when he was campaigning, and he looked like he'd never like talked to a working person before.
The world that he came from is, of course, very, very great. But the other thing that's neat about him is that he went to Yale.
That's so neat that he went to Yale.
And in Yale Law School, in fact. And so he can connect.
Yeah, his laugh is terrible.
He's a fluent speaker of the language of the New York Times, which you cannot say about Donald.
A fluent speaker of the language of the New York Times. That's such a weird, like, cultural thing. And I get it. Like, I am annoyed sometimes by people and friends and family, whatever, whose political worldview is completely shaped by the New York Times, right? That's annoying. But the notion that they have a special language, and if you know how to like speak the language of the New York Times, you're sort of like, you know, winter soldiering someone to be like, yes, I've heard the orders.
Trump. And one of the things that I believe,
guys, are less than a month from a new Captain America movie. I don't know.
Really strongly, you know, that I haven't touched on when I talk about monarchy, is I think that it's utterly
Victoria Evergreen says, bro is saying
anything
nothing
like an American monarchy. You have to be the president of all Americans. And I think this is something that basically the new administration could do a much better job of reaching out to progressive Americans and not demonize it.
He talks like Fred Armisen from the SNL Californians sketches.
Them and basically saying, hey, you want to make this country a better place. I feel like you've been misinformed in some ways. You're not a bad person. This is like 10 to 20% of Americans. This is a lot of people are like the NPR class, but they are not bad.
And then there's the NPR class.
The NPR class?
Yeah. So we have the New York Times class, and then 10 to 20% of Americans who are not bad people, they're a part of the NPR class. I'm a part of the subgroup. I'm a part of the 4% of people who are in the Tiny Desk concert class, where our entire worldview is just built on Tiny Desk concerts. I love Tiny Desk concerts, by the way. But yeah, I just like, again, it's these manufactured sort of groups that, of course, are all relative to some sort of media organization rather than like an ideological point of view.
It's just like a dude who's extremely online.
Yeah, 100%. What's up? Hey, Avik. The NPR class is very, if he had sunglasses, honestly, I think it would be cooler. I would like him more if he had sunglasses on.
Bad people, evil people who want to like do, you know, like, but the thing is, they're human beings. We're all human beings. And
it's funny that he says this because if you had never read any Curtis Yarvin before or heard him talk, when he's like, hey, we're all human beings, I'm like, hey, I fuck with that. Like, I get it. But that is not his vibe.
Human beings can support bad regimes.
The question was, why did you call JD Vance a normie?
Because he contains within.
I do love this interviewer. Again, I know nothing about this guy, but the way he continues to ask relatively straightforward questions and then remind Curtis Yarvin that he's incapable of answering those questions.
Norminess. Right, but he's also an intellectual, and he contains within him intellectualness.
And so, you know, what you just said about, you know, the administration could do a better job of reaching out to progressives, and we're all human beings. As you well know, it's a pretty different stance than the stance you often take in your writing, where you, right, you're laughing because you know it's true, where, you know, you talk about things like de-wokeification, how people who work
those things
at places like.
I saw a good woke take the other day where some person made the point that what most people critique as woke is literally just like human empathy. And that really, I felt like it was a good distillation of why I hate that language so much and what people are really doing when they talk about woke. But it feels like people that hate quote unquote wokeness are mad at the notion that they would be forced to have empathy for people they don't want to have empathy for. And we're seeing this at like the governmental level now, where it's sort of like, rather than have a curiosity and empathy towards the fact that people might, let's say, have gender identities that don't conform with our experiences, rather than consider that, I just like, fuck it, dog, they don't exist. Wild.
Like the New York Times, we should all lose our jobs. We should, you have an idea for a program called Rage, retire all government employees. You have ideas which I hope are satirical about, how to handle non-productive members of society that involve basically locking them in a room forever. So why is your tone, has your thinking shifted? Is your rhetorical tone different in a setting like this?
You're looking.
And that's the thing too, like Yarvin has the problem, and I get this as someone who said some crazy shit in places that's like on record. He has the problem now of trying to like either synthesize the wild shit he said with his current more like I'm a serious big boy stuff, or disavow it.
Looking for different, my thinking is definitely not shifted, and you're finding different emphases. It's like when I talk about Rage, for example,
Rage is retire all government employees.
Both my parents worked for the federal government. They were career, federal employees.
Basically, it's a little on the nose from a Freudian perspective, but
I love that. I love that right there. One of his huge things is he wants all the government employees to retire. He then admits that mommy and daddy were government employees. Interviewers then like, you hear Freud, buddy? But it's true, like, it does feel too on the nose that your biggest point of resentment is towards mom and dad. Come on, man. Come on. I mean, also too, like, this is a guy who grew up the child of foreign service parents who went to like elite private schools and all this sort of stuff. So I'm always very, it's always these people who have like had every experience with the sort of, I guess, to use his silly terms, like New York Times culture, who then have these wild and relatively vacuous critiques of it.
Yeah,
it is. But the thing is, basically, when you look at those
Drift King, I agree.
The way to treat those institutions, I'm just like, treat it like a company that goes out of business, but sort of more so because these people, having had power, have to actually be.
It's also boring because there's so many really good critiques you can make of like the American government and its related structure.
Treated even more delicately and with even more respect. And winning means these are your people now. And so the thing is, when you understand the perspective of the new regime with respect to the American aristocracy, their perspective can't be this sort of anti-aristocratic thing of like, we're going to like bayonet all the professors and like, throw them in ditches or whatever.
What was the question? I'm kind of lost on what he's talking about.
Yeah, I literally think, wait, someone said this interviewer is a deadhead? Drew said that? Marchese? My man, David? That's sick. But like, I literally think the question that he originally asked was, why is JD Vance a normie? Zero said, what are they actually talking about? If you're just tuning in for any reason, we are talking about Curtis Yarvin's recent interview on the New York Times. Just a quick reminder as well, we have some sponsors over here. Someone who is sponsoring this stream this month, wild for them to do this. Wild is Wildgrain. I don't know what Curtis Yarvin's take is on baked goods. Because he participates in elite forms of culture, I imagine he likes a warm croissant or a scone, maybe some fresh sourdough. I love all these things as a member of the NPR Tiny Desk elite. And Wildgrain is a company, they send a box to your house, and the stuff in the box is frozen. You put the stuff in the freezer. You then turn your oven on like 375. You put the stuff in the oven, 25 minutes. You take it out. You eat the stuff. It makes you feel like you have a friggin' bakery at your house. So we got to deal with them. If you go to wildgrain.com/wisecrack, you get a subscription and you get $30 off your first box. I'm a big croissant head. You get free croissants with the order. I recommend checking it out if you get a chance. I can't believe I missed 666 because of this. I'll never really get over that, but I like bread. I don't like Curtis Yarvin. Let's get back to it and see if we can hit 666 again when I'm
Their perspective has to be that, like, you were a normal person serving a regime that did this, like, really weird and crazy stuff.
How invested do you think J.D. Vance is in democracy?
It depends what you mean by democracy.
Lonkin Pork, I saw you ask this. I have a humidifier in front of me because I currently have clogged sinus.
I mean, I think that the problem is basically when people equate democracy with good government. When you use that word, you're using a very tricky word. I would say that what someone like, I'm on very safe ground, despite not knowing him well at all, that someone like J.D. Vance believes essentially in the common good. And
yeah, I definitely think he believes in the common good when he says shit like if women don't have kids, we should like tax them double.
And the idea that government should serve the common good. And I think that's...
And then, of course, we got to think about what the common good means, but that's a whole other question.
People like JD and people in the sort of the broader intellectual scene around him, which is very varied intellectuals.
Do you think there's an intellectual scene around JD? This is another thing, too, like, because, like, which one is it? Is it that all the university professors are horrible commie fucks that are ruining the world and need to be bayoneted or whatever it is, and they're bad for being intellectuals? Or is it that there's like a class of intellectuals surrounding J.D. Vance and government officials? I don't know. My take on this, and we'll talk about this in an upcoming video on the channel, is and remains that academics are some of the least influential people in American public life, especially academics in the theoretical humanities.
Scene. Would all agree on that principle.
Okay, that's solidly over 675. Hey guys, take the red pill, wear a leather jacket, put your shades on at night, pop some Ozempic, and get ready to party like a neo-reactionary thinker. We did it. We went below right now, but that was a really special moment we had. I'll never forget it. Yeah, but Yarvin would be more interesting if he just went full like Satanist badass. What is this soft shit?
If that principle, I don't know what you mean by democracy in this context. What I do know is that if democracy is against the common good, it's bad, and if it's for the common good, it's good.
I agree with Matt Rogers that Yarvin's a less annoying Jordan Peterson.
Might be something that Peter Thiel would agree with, and there was
I think a progressive could agree with it.
And there was reporting that I saw, I think it was 2017, reporting done by BuzzFeed, where they
I pre-listened to some of this, and there's some spicy stuff coming up, so don't worry, guys.
Published some emails, I think, between you and the right-wing provocateur.
Oh, and just a note as well, since we didn't stream on Monday because it was Election Day / MLK Day / College National Championship Game Day, we're going to stream on Friday. So we'll have Monday on Friday this week.
Milo Yiannopoulos, where you talked about.
But I guess if Case of the Mondays is normally like a way to start the week and not feel too miserable, Case of the Fridays is a little more like, okay, guys, let's fuck out of here.
About watching the 2016 election with Peter Thiel and referred to him as fully enlightened. What would fully enlightened have meant in that context?
What fully enlightened for me generally means fully disenchanted. When I look at basically what the kinds of people that I know not really that well in Silicon Valley think, I'm basically like, have people like this been exposed to my ideas?
Extraneous, is that for sinus stuff?
Do they agree that America should be a monarchy? I doubt it, but I have no idea. But what they agree on is not a belief, but a disbelief. So
what they agree on is not a belief, but a
disbelief. I think that when a person who lives their life within the kind of, sort of progressive bubble, liberal bubble, use whatever term you like.
Well, use a term and then define it. Like, I still am so confused by what this progressive liberal bubble thing means. Because I think you could say, I'm going to blow my nose 1 second. I don't know, if you were to be like, because I think there is a liberal bubble. I'll make some examples here. You could say like the sort of liberal who, is college educated, listens to Pod Save America, really loved Hamilton, has a fundamental belief in electoralism or something like that. I mean, like there's a type of person, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I know and love many people that tick those boxes, but when we just throw around those terms generally, it like takes the juice out of any critique
of, the current year.
And I love juice.
Looks at the right or even the new right or whatever, you want to call it, I think what's hardest to
Drift King, we're
see
gonna try to
is
figure out
that
how to
what's
survive.
really shared
I don't know
is
yet,
not a
though.
positive belief, but an absence of belief.
Okay.
Basically, we don't worship these same gods. We do not sort of see, the New York Times and Harvard as like divinely inspired in any sense, or we do not see their
Harvard again.
procedures as ones that sort of always lead to truth and wisdom. We do not think.
Well, guys, here's a new thing that Trump did. President Donald Trump has signed into law a ban on the use of LGBTQI+ flags in public buildings.
What?
It just feels needlessly cruel. I'm sure on public buildings you could still do like, thin blue line flags or whatever it might be, but it feels needlessly cruel and kind of weird and hateful. Like, why? I don't know, man. Why are queer people why are they bad? Why are they the bad guys? I don't understand. I don't understand.
That the way the U.S. government works, really works well or seems.
And he also revoked the Equal Employment Opportunity Act of 1965 today.
To be perfect in any respect.
And this absence of belief is what you call enlightened.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It's a disenchantment.
One more news thing as I catch up on stuff. Republican Congressman Mike Collins, damn, I hate when fucking Irish Americans are pieces of shit, says Bishop Marianne Buddy, or however you say it, Bud, should be deported after asking Donald Trump for grace towards immigrants and the LGBTQ community.
Enchantment from believing in these old systems, and the right thing that should replace that disenchantment is not, we need to go do things Curtis's way, and is basically just a greater openness of mind and a greater ability to look around and say, we just assume that our political science is superior to Aristotle's political science because our physics is superior to Aristotle.
This is the point where he almost gets interesting, but I don't know. I think most people don't give a shit about Aristotle. I think they should. Aristotle rips. But I also don't think people that actually think about political philosophy and theory would agree with that. That's just a thing that I would say.
Aristotle's physics. What if that isn't so?
You're basically,
and that would be more interesting if he's going to make that point. Then let's talk about that. I would love it if we had a public intellectual that was influential in government that understood Aristotle and wanted to talk about how revisiting, Aristotelian principles on government could be helpful in the current moment. Because I think that's true. I think that's 100% true. But he doesn't do that. And I'll tell you one thing that Aristotle doesn't do, guys. Aristotle isn't so go to Silicon Valley, find a CEO that started a company that did sort of crowdsourced penal implants created by orphans, and then put that person in charge of the government. I guarantee you, Aristotle didn't say that.
Saying there's a historical and political recency bias that people are susceptible to.
Exactly.
But I think the thing that you have not quite isolated yet is why having a strong man figure would be better for people's lives.
Aristotle
Can
is
you
pronounced
answer
like
that
Chipotle.
question?
Number one, I think that having an effective government and an efficient government is better for people's lives. And I think that, the best.
Okay, so he said something he believes. He believes having an efficient government is better for people's lives. That sounds fair.
When I ask people to answer that question, I sort of ask them to look around the room and basically point out everything in the room that was made by a monarchy. Because these things that we call companies are actually little monarchies.
But are they? Because isn't a monarchy describing a certain sort of political rule in which there's a monarchical rule over people? Is it a monarchy? Because there's a difference, right? If you live in a monarchy, shout out to anyone who lives in a monarchy. You're in Saudi Arabia, or I don't know, where are their monarchies today? I don't know. I mean, there's one in Britain, but it's fake. But let's say you did live in England 300 years ago or whatever. If you're in a monarchy, you're just in a monarchy. You know what I'm saying? You're not, you don't have control over this thing. There is a system that exists and you have no agency in it. If you work for a private corporation, it is not a monarchy because you are being paid a wage for your participation in that thing and you could leave it at any given time. And the monarch, the leader of these corporations, can be replaced by the vote, a democratic vote, of a board of directors. So it's just such a weird thing he's obsessed with. And I know he's going to give some examples in a bit, but it's one of his big ideas right here. So if this big idea sucks, then maybe the whole thing sucks.
Yeah.
Okay. You're looking around yourself and you see, for example, a laptop. And that laptop
Oh.
was made by Apple, which is a
Oh.
monarchy. And
Oh.
it has a little thing on it that says designed in
Oh.
California and made in China.
Right.
It is
Yes,
made.
this is an example you use a lot where you say, and if you know if Apple ran California, wouldn't that be much
Right.
better run?
Whereas
than,
if your MacBook Pro was made by the California Department of Computing,
yeah.
you can only imagine it. I'm sorry, I'm here in this building and I keep forgetting to make my best argument for monarchy.
Make it. Let's see. He just said, he called his shot. He said this is his best argument for monarchy.
Which is that people trust the New York Times more than any other source in the world. And how?
What?
Again, like, you could say the New York Times is very popular. That is very true. But if that were true, for example, if more people trust the New York Times than anywhere else in the world, I mean, I don't know. Say what you will about the New York Times. You can say a lot of stuff about the New York Times. I don't know. They endorsed Kamala Harris and said Trump is bad, and Trump and all his boys won. It's just I don't like, where is this? Where is the grounding for this claim?
How is the New York Times managed? It is a 5th generation hereditary absolute monarchy. And
a 5th generation hereditary absolute monarchy is the New York Times.
So we've basically taken,
the look on our guy's face.
We've taken in some ways, like, and this was very much the vision of the early progressives, by the way. The early progressives, even like the pre-World War I progressives, you go back to, a book like, Drift and Mastery, are very...
I have to say, I find the depth of background information to be obfuscating rather than illuminating.
So well put. So well put. You didn't hear that. He said all the background information is obfuscating rather than illuminating, because he doesn't tell us things. One of my favorite philosophers, a guy named Alain Badiou, if we've hung out, digitally, physically, whatever, you've heard this name before. A thing I love that he does is he'll write these big theoretical books, like 500 pages, real crazy shit. But then he'll publish a supplementary book that's like that thick, and it kind of just has like the bullet points of the big ideas. And if one of the most important and complex philosophers of the modern era is able to condense his big ideas into at least like bullet pointy axioms that most people could understand, then we should have the same expectation for someone like a Curtis Yarvin. But instead, we're 21 minutes and 40 seconds into this, and we know that he thinks CEOs are good, and we know that the New York Times is bad.
No, the New York Times is a monarchy.
Oh, it's a monarchy. Yeah.
But how can I change that? How can I make that?
By answering the questions more directly and succinctly, I think.
That's just so real. I mean, he's not wrong. I love the confidence this guy operates with.
Would be the simple reply.
Fine, I'll try.
But the thing I'd like to say, just to tie this back.
But you know what? I'll compliment him in this way, and someone in the chat already pointed this out. Compared to some of the other horrible chuds that have intellectual influence on our society, like Peterson types, Yarvin can at least play the game of like talking to a human like a human. Right? Because if Jordan Peterson was interviewed by this guy and the guy was like, just answer a freaking question, Jordan Peterson would like get mad and yell at him.
Back a little bit to something we spoke about a minute ago is, there is this idea that the incoming Trump administration is interested in the idea of a more powerful executive office. Are there things that you would like to see, or if you saw them, would be hints to you that the Trump administration is taking the right steps, as you might see it, towards actually enacting that reality?
I saw people bringing up the New York Times cooking channel on YouTube. Fun fact, one of the main people that does cool recipe videos for the New York Times watches Wisecrack. It's a fact I happen to know, and it was one of the few times I felt very starstruck by someone who I know watches our channel and participates in that world.
And becoming a stronger executive, a more monarchical executive office.
I would say that the incoming Trump administration is based, with all due respect, and there's a lot of great people there and people who are working extremely hard. Unfortunately, I would say that they're essentially finding themselves in a position where they're trying to untangle the Gordian knot. And
meaning what?
This is an instance where, again, he uses language like they're trying to untangle the Gordian knot. Just say things. Plain speak, my guy. Just say stuff. Like the levels of obfuscation this guy goes to are wild. And I get it, and makes people think. And I get this, guys. There is times in my life where I have fallen for various intellectual figures because they were complex, and in my mind, because I didn't understand them, well, it meant they must be smart, or it meant there must be something to uncover. But it's important to note that a lot of people, it sounds like they're full of shit or just full of shit.
Meaning that they're basically trying to, let's take just NASA in specific. So for example, if you compare NASA to SpaceX, that's a fine example of actually all of the principles that.
I mean, I'll compare them. NASA went to the moon in the 60s. SpaceX, I don't know what the analogy for that now would be, but SpaceX hasn't done it.
I've been describing, because NASA was once as efficient as SpaceX. So if you basically say, okay, at a very abstract level, forget the rest of the government, Elon, go and fix NASA, right? The goal of NASA is to give us cool space shit. We feel like we're not getting enough cool space shit. You have $25 billion a year, go and do cool space shit. I think you would get a lot more cool space shit under that principle.
The most likable I found him in this entire thing is when he couldn't help but just say cool space shit 5 times in 10 seconds.
But one of the basic principles of kind of the California startup way of thinking is just to realize it's way easier to create a new NASA than it is to fix the old NASA. And that principle extends sort of around the government.
Your ideas, and I guess has been called like sort of a neo-reactionary cast of mind, are seemingly increasingly popular in the Silicon Valley world. Don't you think there's some...
I've heard this part before. The point he makes here is really good.
Some level on which that world is responding to your ideas because you're just telling them what they want to hear. If more people like me were in charge, things would be better. It's an ideologically useful set of arguments for them to...
The funny thing is, I think that's almost the opposite of the truth. It's like, let me give you a very simple illustration of this. Someone I have actually...
I mean, yeah. If someone wrote a book and they were like, I think like failed academic, bald YouTube host are really the model for the people that should lead us into the future. I'd be like, man, this guy is fucking smart.
Never met, believe it or not, who is Elon Musk. Now, Elon tweeted the other day, he was like, the proper structure of government on Mars should be not just a democracy, but a direct democracy. Let me sort of examine
again, like the fact that Elon Musk would waste time talking about government structure on Mars is so masturbatory.
Thinking behind Musk saying this, because I find it sort of extremely odd in a sense, because one of the things about monarchy that's been known for quite some time, and again, we've been in very, very anti-monarchical regimes and periods, an exception is made for this, is that a ship always has a captain. An airplane always has a captain. Basically, in any very safety-critical environment,
you should have someone in charge.
You should have someone in charge. But the thing is, you look at basically a Mars colony, and you're just like, really? Are the citizens of the Mars colony going to vote?
Like, we have so many concrete structural problems in American political life, and motherfuckers want to talk
on how to replenish the oxygen supply or whatever. No, of course not. The Mars colony that Elon establishes will be a subsidiary of SpaceX, and it will have someone in charge, and it will have a command hierarchy, just like SpaceX does. And so I'm like, Elon, when you say that this should be a democracy, what are the people voting on? And so there's this world of actually real governance that someone like Elon Musk lives in.
That wasn't a good argument at all against the claim that the interviewer was making, which is, don't you think the reason that your work is popular in Silicon Valley is precisely because you're telling all these people everything you're already doing is good and that more stuff should be like that? He responded with a circuitous, now I'm using douchey sounding words because I'm listening to this friggin' guy, circuitous example about Elon Musk's tweets about Mars.
In every day, and actually applying that world, applying that thinking to being like, oh, this is, this thinking is directly contradictory in a sense to the ideals that I was taught in this society. That's a really difficult cognitive dissonance problem, even if you're Elon Musk.
When I hear you talk about the need for a monarch, and we'll just use that term, encompassing CEOs or dictators. I'll just say monarch.
Monarch is good. It's a neutral term.
It would be an understatement to say that humanity's record with monarchs is mixed at best. Roman Empire under Marcus Aurelius seems like it went pretty well. Under Nero,
any good monarchs
not
you guys
so
know
much.
about?
Spain's Charles III is a monarch you point to a lot. He's like sort of your favorite monarch. Louis XIV, he's like starting wars like they're going out of business. And then in those are all sort of before the age of democracy. And then if
the
you look at more
in the age of democracy are just terrible.
Terrible. I can't believe I'm saying a phrase like this. If you put Hitler aside and only look at Mao, Stalin, Pol Pot, Pinochet, Idi Amin.
All the cool guys.
We're looking at people responsible for the deaths of something like 75 to 100 million people. So given that historical precedent, do we really want to try dictatorship?
Your question is the most important question of all, because basically understanding like why Hitler was so bad, why Stalin was so bad is really like essential to the riddle of the 20th century. But I think it's important to note that we don't see for the rest of European and like world history, human history as a whole is a mixed bag. The history of the age of democracy.
He does this thing, and I think he's going to go into talk about more of this, where like history was mostly good because in the 20th century we have some uniquely horrific events. But I mean, history like most of history sucked. I'm currently listening to this audio course on the history of Irish politics and literature. And it's like, for most of the history of Ireland, for example, like life sucked shit for most people. And life was kind of cool for a tiny amount of people. And for most of human history, like, or at least like, most of human civilization, life has sucked shit for most people and been kind of okay for some people. And I'm not trying to say that makes the atrocities of the 20th century less unique, but it's like, yeah, we had some periods in the 20th century in a democratic situation where really horrible stuff happened and lots of people died. Bad stuff. But for most of history, stuff just sucked shit. Like, you ever think about a time machine and someone does a thing where it's like, if you could go back to any time, and it's like, it was all pretty tough.
Yeah, no.
It was all pretty tough. I get maybe like going back in time so you could like see a dinosaur or like meet your great grandma or like look at Caesar or see if Jesus was real or whatever it might be. But you don't want to like hang out there because it sucked, In fairness, the present is starting to suck too.
In the last 250 years is also a mixed bag. And
but we don't see in human history what? If you didn't finish the
Holocaust. You can pull the camera way back and basically say, wow,
that feels really
Europe
cheap and almost like
basically
instrumentalizing
the establishment
the Holocaust
of European civilization from like 1000 AD to 1750 AD. We didn't have this kind of chaos and violence, and then you can't
up till from 1000 AD to 1750 was sick. Everyone was just crushing
separate Hitler and Stalin from the sort of global democratic revolution that they're a part of.
So the argument, I guess, is that things were chilling good during monarchs. Everyone's life was great. Revolution of democracy happened in the 19th and early 20th century, and that led directly to Hitler, Stalin, Mao. No problems. Clear. I'm convinced.
But one thing I noticed when I was going through your stuff is that you make these historical claims, like the one you just made about sort of no genocide.
No, the Crusades were chill.
Between 1000 AD
Inquisition was
and
chill.
The Holocaust, essentially. And then I poke around and think, is that true? And then you think, well,
you have
there was Tamerlane. He killed. There was
Tamerlane was not in Europe. I meant Europe though. Like,
well, it's okay on the edges of Europe, and then that's sort of like a goalpost shift there. But then, or you think, well, there were
not white doesn't count.
There's the French Wars of Religion. They killed millions of people, including the massacre of the Huguenots. So I often find when you just scratch a little at some of the historical,
there was no massacre of Huguenots. I think you're confusing it with the sack of Béziers and the massacre of the Albigensians.
So they got massacred, not the Huguenots.
Yeah. But the thing is, when people look at the Holocaust, they saw like a new species of deviltry that had not really...
A new species of deviltry.
Deviltry?
When I think about that, Deviltry Inns and Suites, it's a hotel chain.
Existed in the world in that way before. When you see a city sacked in the Middle Ages, you see just like wild, undisciplined troops like raging around. You don't see...
I see Wayne in the chat says this is the most peaceful time in history, which like It's true. Like, it is the case. Again, like when I was reading about, or in this course I'm listening to about like Irish history, there's all these periods where like people are chilling in their little village. Then a boat of Vikings shows up who speak a different language and start killing and raping everyone. Pretty unchill stuff. Sean O'Leary, great name, said, Henry, you ruled, dude. Wow. Guys, stop sucking up to Henry so much. It's becoming a little bit ridiculous. Kidding.
Like lines of people march to their deaths.
My skepticism comes from what I feel like is a pretty strong cherry picking of historical incidents to support your arguments. And then I look and you're like, the incidents that you're pointing to are either not necessarily factually settled, or there's a different way of looking at them. But I actually want to, just because some of the historical references and are now actually making my head hurt, I just want to ask a couple very concrete questions about some of the stuff that you've written about race, for example.
Oh, he's great on race. Curtis Yarvin on race. It's really the top guy. Great people. Great on race. The guy knows everything about race.
Which seems pretty provocative, to say the least. I'll read you some examples. This is the trouble with white nationalism. It is strategically barren. It offers no effective political program.
That's my big critique of white nationalism, too. If only they had an effective program, I'd be like, sign me up.
To me, the trouble with white nationalism is that it's racist, not that it's strategically unsophisticated. Well, there's two more. There's two more. It is very difficult to argue that the Civil War made anyone's life more pleasant, including that of freed slaves.
Ooh. Check that out. Check that one out. Check that one out, guys. That's a thing to write. And listen, I say some dumb stuff out loud, but he put that on wax. The Civil War didn't make anyone's lives better, including freed slaves, who were slaves before.
Come on. The third one. The third one. If you ask me to condemn Anders Breivik, the Norwegian mass murderer, but adore Nelson Mandela, perhaps you have a mother you'd like to.
Whoa!
So
that was so.
I was just joking, guys.
Let's go through.
What is he doing? Anders Breivik, just in case anyone forgot, is the Norwegian guy that showed up to that like summer camp and started shooting everyone to like stop Islam or whatever. Bad guy. Nelson Mandela fought against apartheid, but they're the same.
This is a guy who will live through. Will achieve harmony.
Let's go through each of those examples. And so, when you look, for example, at Mandela. The reason I said that, most people don't know this, there was a little contretemps when Mandela was released because he actually had to be taken off the terrorist list.
I mean, maybe the more relevant point is that Nelson Mandela was in jail for opposing a viciously racist apartheid regime. But
the viciously racist apartheid regime, basically, they had.
So his point here again is that there was an apartheid regime in South Africa, and Nelson Mandela was like, we should tear that down because that's bad. And then the apartheid government was like, you're a terrorist, because he wanted to tear down the apartheid government. And Yarvin's claim is that I guess he's like ontologically just a terrorist because the terror he wanted to do was tear down an apartheid government. Oh boy,
him on the terrorist list. So if you look
let's get a
real quick reminder though of something that'll never be on the terrorist list. And that's great coffee. I feel like ass today, but I feel a little bit better on the stream because I brewed a cup of coffee this morning. I brought it here in my mug. And it's from our friends at Yes Please. This is the newest thing I got from them. It's called Hotspot, which is what I got nothing. I was going to try to make a joke connecting Hotspot to Yarvin. If any of you can do it, feel free. But they're our friends. You get 20% off Yes Please coffee with code Wisecrack. It's my favorite coffee. Some of you probably know this. I might have told you, like, I've canceled my subscription to a coffee service I've had for like 7 years because of how much I like Yes Please coffee. I gave away some bags of Yes Please around the holidays, and people were all like, yo, that shit ripped. Because I hang out with a bunch of like cool teens that talk like that. But it's great, and I recommend it. So if you're a coffee drinker, do check out Yes Please and let us know what you think. Let's get back to hearing about why white nationalist terrorism is the same as trying to end apartheid.
Into the other two.
But again, your quote was, if you ask me to condemn Anders Breivik, but adore Nelson Mandela,
I'd prefer to condemn them both. And the thing is, basically, when you look at the
I
impact,
prefer to condemn them both. I think it's equal. Just murdering a bunch of kids because of Islamophobia is the same as trying to liberate a country from apartheid. Is it? It's not.
What does this have to do with equating Anders Breivik, who shot people
answer a question.
on some bizarre deluded mission to rid Norway of Islam with Nelson Mandela?
Because they're both terrorists, and because
they're both terrorists because of what? Why is he doing this? Why is he like this?
Because they basically both violated the rules of war in the same.
They violated the rules of war. If someone wants to enlighten me in the chat, how did Nelson Mandela violate the rules of war? Were the rules of war in South Africa that if you were black, you can't do stuff? You stay behind the wall? What are you talking about?
Way. And they both basically killed innocent people. We valorize terrorism.
Oh, hell yeah, Sean O'Leary. Glad you
this
got it.
valorization.
So Gandhi then is your model. Martin Luther King, nonviolent.
It's more complicated than that, but I could say things about either. But let's move on to one of your other examples. I think the best way to basically grapple with that period directly.
Which period are we talking about now?
1860s.
Eddie,
okay, let's talk about
we're talking about the Civil War.
African Americans in the 1860s. Yeah. Okay, the thing that you can do that any Times reader can do.
I just want to be real. In case you're missing this right now, he's literally about to give an explanation of why the Civil War and its result made life worse for black people in America. And, if we want to try to be like devil's advocate, Reconstruction wasn't cool. It's not like slavery ended. And then it was like, here's your 40 acres, sir. Everything's great now. It still sucked shit. But I think at a very baseline level, it's hard to argue that humans having a level of freedom, agency, and autonomy is worse than, being a slave.
Period directly.
Which period are we talking about now?
1860s.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, let's talk about
we're talking about the Civil War.
African Americans in the 1860s.
Yeah.
Okay, the thing that you can do that any Times reader can do, just go to your Google bar and Google slave narratives. Just go and read random slave narratives and get their experience of the time. So the thing is that basically the treatment of the freed slaves after the war is extremely. There was a recent historian who published a thing, and I think I would dispute this number is too high, but his estimate was that something like a quarter of all the freedmen basically die in between 1865 and 1870.
Yeah. Well, again, I can't speak to the veracity of that.
That's too high. Anyway, the thing is basically But
you're saying there are historical examples in slave narratives where the freed slaves themselves expressed regret at having been freed. But this to me is another prime example of how you selectively read history, because if you read other slave narratives where they talk about the horrible brutality of it. So what?
And
that there are some
listen, there is good men on both sides of slavery. I think is what he said.
Narratives,
and I say this, and I say
how
this.
does that justify?
I say this in the conversation.
Made anyone's life more pleasant. Difficult to argue that the Civil War made anyone's life more pleasant, including freed slaves. Their children were no longer sold out from under them.
When I said anyone,
Matt Rogers, shout out for being honest with yourself about having some bad ideas when you were younger. It's very cool. Eddie, I totally get, and I respect you for getting off meta stuff. I want to try to do it. It feels increasingly icky to use all.
Okay, first of all, when I said anyone, I was talking about a population group rather than individuals.
But are you seriously arguing that the era of slavery was somehow better than the era?
The era of 1865 to 1875 was absolutely, and the war itself wasn't good either. But if you look at the living conditions for an African American in the South, they are absolutely at their nadir between 1865 and 1875. They are.
I'll categorize this under something that I feel like you wouldn't say if there was a black person in the room. There's just things that white people with sort of reactionary politics will say very confidently using their logic brains, which they wouldn't say if there was a black person in the room.
Very, very bad, because basically this economic system has been disrupted.
But abolition was a necessary step to get through that period towards to make people free.
Sure.
Like, I can't believe I'm arguing this.
Brazil abolished slavery in the 1880s without a civil war. And so the thing is, when you look at basically, the cost of the war or the meaning of the war, you're basically just like, it just visited this huge amount of destruction on all sorts of people, black and white. Just
everyone suffered under, in the war. Black people, everyone suffered, Robert E. Lee, the other guy. Everyone suffered.
I'm just like, all of these evils and all of these goods existed in people at this time. And what I'm fighting against in both of those quotes, also in the way, the people respond, to Breivik, I'm like, basically, you're responding in this kind of cartoonish way to something that...
It's cartoonish to say that a guy that, again, was like a weird lone wolf psycho that took a gun and killed a bunch of kids, it's cartoonish to be like, that's bad.
Terrorism, which is, what is the difference between a terrorist and a freedom fighter? That's a really important question in 20th century history. To say...
But see, he tries to make things way more difficult than they need to be. Think about it this way, simple principle. Is someone fighting on the side of liberation, equality, and justice, or someone fighting on the side of a sort of like conservation, a fear, a punishment of the other? Anders Breivik, for example, killed people because he was afraid of Muslims taking over Norway or something like that. It was a fundamental, in like a small C way, conservative act of trying to punish some outside group to conserve the purity of the group he was a part of. If you look at someone like Mandela, call those acts terrorists if you want, but the end game was an act of liberation in a society. The same way you talk about like Toussaint Louverture and like the Haitian Revolution. Was that terrorism, or was it fighting for the sake of the liberation of enslaved people on the island of Haiti? Again, I don't know why I've been on this IRA wave recently, but if you look at some of the political action in Ireland in the century, when the point is the equality of all people and the liberation of a society from an oppressive force, that's how we can kind of like use these things as a metric. It's not hard. And he does this thing where he overcomplicates both to make himself seem smart and overcomplicates to avoid acknowledging relative truths, because it wouldn't work for him if it was simple. It doesn't work for his logic if we can all, as smart individuals, clearly differentiate between the teleology of Anders Breivik and the teleology of Nelson's party. It's not complicated.
That I'm going to have a strong opinion about this stuff without having the answer to that question, I think is really difficult and wrong.
Now, maybe you think
the House of Kondo, that's my full name, Michael O'Shaughnessy McGinnis.
I haven't been red-pilled or whatever, or I'm not thinking through these issues enough. But I feel like, to me, you call it cartoonish, I call it very morally clear. I can say something like, I think slavery was bad. I'm glad there are no longer enslaved people. And then to hear you then say,
dog, if you can't just say that.
Well, you have to look at it from this other perspective. This is a one-dimensional view of history. I think, well, no, I think it's pretty cut and dry. It just is very fascinating to me that your ideas, which strike me as pretty extreme, there were fringe ideas to me that apparently are no longer on the fringe. And that's, I don't know, what do you think that says about conservatism today?
I think that American conservatism is in the long and very, very difficult.
He does this thing where he like kind of like looks down and is like, imagine if on the stream I was just, and I think the thing here is that
grieving process of realizing that it has always been a fraud. And I think one of the especially dangers in American conservatism is that there's so much grift in it.
Hence,
and
I would
so
love that
much
video.
of it consumes so much energy and so much attention and produces so little. You are still a factor of 100 from being able to give the people who are voting for you and donating to you anything like what they imagine they're going to get from you.
And when you say it's a fraud, I take that to mean insofar as its conservatism is just...
The Washington Generals are never going to win the game. It just doesn't have the power to give anything that it promises.
Okay, so we a little break.
After the break, I call Curtis back to ask more about the incoming administration.
I don't think we need
Thank you for taking the time to talk with me again. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It was fun.
No leather jacket doesn't look nearly as cool.
Let's have some more fun.
We'll watch a little bit more and then we'll wrap up.
You do so often draw on the history of the pre-democratic era, which is a historical period sort of exactly coterminous with, for example, women being treated as second-class citizens.
I don't know why we're talking MF Doom in the chat, but I love it.
That time period, which you valorize, is not something I've really seen come up in your writings. Do you feel like your arguments take enough into account the way that sort of monarch?
I heard this part. Listen to his account of why life was good for women before women had equal rights.
Monarchies and dictatorships historically tend not to be great for big swaths of demographics.
So, okay, so let's look at, enfranchisement in specific. So when I look at the status of women in, say, a Jane Austen novel, which is
a Jane Austen novel, that's what he's using to talk about the history of the care and treatment of women. A Jane Austen novel. It's a novel. Just made up. It's a made up book. I don't really know if that's a good historical argument.
Before enfranchisement, it actually seems kind of okay. The women in Jane Austen's book seems to be fine.
Who are desperate to land a husband because they have.
What are is it the March sisters in Little Women? Is that their name? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like he went and saw Greta Gerwig's Little Women and was, oh, they're crushing it. These sisters are just tossing around Chalamet like a fucking rag doll. Why not? Wild take.
No access to income without them.
Well, have you ever seen anything like that in the 21st century? I mean, the whole class in Jane Austen's world is the class of like UBI earning aristocrats, right? But
are you not willing to say that there
big
were
UBI
aspects of political life in the era of kings that were inferior or provided less liberty for people than political life does today?
It's very hard. So
here's what I'll say. I think the most interesting thing about all this, if we're going to say there's some, oh, Little Women isn't Austen. Shit. Oops. Who's Jane Austen? What did she write? I don't know anything. I'm not. Pride and Prejudice. Oh, yeah. Oh,
Pride
I like
and
that
Prejudice
one too.
and Emma.
Oh, yeah. Pride and Prejudice. That's cool. They did a movie with Keira Knightley in it. That was
there
fun.
was a pretty good Emma movie not too long ago.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that was fun too. I think what's her name was in that. But beside the point, here's the issue. There's always going to be guys like this. The issue is, what is it about this that people find appealing? And especially, what is it about, very online, young to middle-aged men that find it so appealing? I think this is the real interesting thing, the real problem that we're left with all this, which is, I'm going to throw some shit at the wall here. If you guys want to throw some shit at the wall, chat, would love to see it smeared down the wall. In one sense, there's a very simple idea that the interviewer already got, which is that if you are telling a group of people, namely Silicon Valley types and CEOs, that they are what the political future needs, well, of course, that's going to be appealing, right? Just full stop. I think maybe like another part of it is the very stuff that makes it so vacuous and stupid is potentially the same stuff that makes other people feel smart. So maybe you are a young man on the internet and his edgy, obscure references make you feel like you have special access. And then that's a real feeling. I know that one of the reasons I got into philosophy and political theory is reading text and feeling like, especially as a young man, like, no one else has read this. I now have the secret code.
The intellectual capital.
Yeah. And, I would say the difference is when you read whoever, like Marx, Derrida, Foucault, they're connected to an intellectual history. And the coolest thing is often you might get into the sexy contemporary thinker and thing, or Hegel or Descartes or whatever, or Rousseau, because you're understanding their thought in context. But someone like Yarvin doesn't really give you that same opportunity. And it's like the same thing that makes his work so unconvincing is the same thing that makes it, to quote unquote, disprove, and yeah, I guess the question is then like, are there, how does one do a better job of appealing to the people that he's appealing to? I feel like I'm talking about goddamn bananas right now. Because, better or worse, Yarvin is someone that people are still considering, that they're still taking seriously, and that he does have this indirect influence. Like, Yarvin's not getting called, but Andreessen and Thiel and people like that do have a massive political influence. Why do they have political influence? It's because they were democratically elected. Of course not. They have a lot of money. And I think maybe that's part of it. So, sorry, Mav is saying some great stuff about the books he's referencing there. So check that in the chat if you haven't already. But I think as well, like, any valid, not even valid, any worthwhile, radical theory should be something that's able to sort of analyze the situation that we're currently in clearly, to give a historical situatedness for that place that we're currently in, and then be able to talk about how we can get someplace else and why that place is normally liberatory and better for everyone. If you look at most moments of political revolution in Western history, at least, those moments all have, and even if it goes the wrong way, a tendency towards something more liberatory and progressive than we currently have. And here, it just seems like an acknowledgement that democracy, human freedom, and egalitarianism is a failed project. So what should we aim for? Efficiency. Where we once aimed for freedom, justice, brotherhood, liberty, we now just aim for efficiency. And what is efficiency? An economic efficiency. And this is something he gets to, and you guys can go look this up and watch the last little bit here. But, that's why the logic of Silicon Valley and the logic of CEOs might not be the best when applied to people, because what matters from a corporate perspective other than increasing shareholder value? It's not people, it's shareholder value. So it's very hard to do that. Let's see. Yeah, and Mav is dropping some stuff here. Flex his professorial skills and help us understand that better. So shouts to that. Guys, we will be back on Friday with a special case of the Fridays edition. Thank you so much for liking, commenting, and hanging out in the chat. If you watch this after, leave a comment. We check them out. We care what you guys think. If you ever have ideas for stuff we can cover on the show, you can email us at wisecracklive666@gmail.com, or you can hit us up on the Discord, which you get on if you're on the Patreon. Very, very nice to hang out with you guys. Today I would say there was a chance in which I was going to have to sick day it today. Shout out to this, and also for this humidifier, they don't sponsor us. This Levois company or whatever, this thing was like $17, and it's a game changer. I literally had it going in the car on my way here. So I would say if you're also a snotty sinus boy or snotty sinus person, snotty sinus whoever, I'm not doing Trump gender rules, you should definitely check it out. A 1 p.m. Eastern Friday. Yes, sir, Eddie. Thanks as always to producer Henry, the best in the game. And thanks to Ann Porkins for just spreading the gospel of slop. We'll see you guys on Friday. Bye.
See you on Friday.